Recording in progress.
Oh, ඈ
අර මැෂින් එකේ අම්මාව හොස්ට් කරලා ඒකේ තියෙන grades වල grade 8 history සිංහල medium කියලා start at 3:45 කියලා ගහලා මට start කරන්න. ඒකට මාව හොස්ට් වෙනවා.
ඔයා 4:05ට join වෙන්න මිස් join වුණාට පස්සේ ඔයා close කරන්න නැත්නම් මිස්ටර් join වෙන්නත් බෑ. අපච්චි ආවද නංගා? Good evening. So, today it is our first day in which we are going to start the EdXL curriculum for grade 8 students. So, we are at the beginning of the classes for year 2025 at Guru Nivasa. So, as the first day, I would like to discuss with you all about the basic things. That means we'll give an introduction for all the topics. We will go through your book overall, right? Then after that, from the coming week onwards, we will start a lesson, right? Okay. So if I introduce myself to you all, I'm Utpala Videsa. I started my teaching career as a government school teacher in year 2010. It was at Royal College, Colombo. And I have worked there for about 14 years until 2024 March, right? And within this time period, even before I have started my teaching career, I have conducted classes for EdXL and Cambridge curricula as well as private tuition classes. So I have the ability to teach you all either in local curriculum or EdXL or Cambridge, right? If I mention about my academic background, I have completed my first degree at University of California. I am a graduate of biological science, and after that I completed my postgraduate diploma in education in order to be professionally qualified as a teacher. Then I successfully completed my Master of Education as well, right? That is briefly about myself, right? So actually we are going to follow. I think most of you have this particular book. You are following this book in most of the international schools for grade 8, Exploring Science. This is the course book, and this is your workbook, right? So we will use this as a framework, right? Because in for the other subjects, other grades also, we have a scheme of work. There they have mentioned certain specifications, so we have to refer those. We will take the topics from these books. We will use it as a guide, and we will follow our own method to do the lessons, right? Okay. So if the parents have any issue, since it is the first day, if you need anything to be clarified, you can ask something, right? If you want anything to be clarified based on the method that we are teaching and how the questions are discussed, actually I will mention those, right? Within these 2 hours we will be discussing. Actually my method of teaching is I am giving the theoretical component also in the form of questions and answers, most probably. So the student learns how to write an answer for a question. At the same time they are learning the theory part and then answering the questions. We will have this like a discussion from the coming week onwards. So you will have to add your ideas, and if you are interested, I will give you the chance to do presentations in the class. You can ask questions from the audience even, right? So this would be a very interactive session, right? You are free to ask questions from me. If whenever you have a problem, you have to raise your hand, you can unmute and just ask. I prefer it rather than sending messages to the chat, right? And you all have to keep your videos on, right? Because I want to see you all, then only it would be something very interactive, and we will not feel that this is an online session because I can see you all on a separate screen, right? Therefore you all have to keep your videos on. Okay, right. Okay, Aishma, you just joined. Actually, I was giving an introduction about myself and the way that we are going to have the session, right? Could you please turn on the video, Aishma? Yes, Aishma, can you hear me? Okay. So now I have given an introduction about myself. What's your school, Aishma?
Stafford International School.
Okay. So what is the book that you are following? Is it Exploring Science? Is it this book?
Yes, miss.
This one? Right. Okay, sure. Um, so actually I was telling that since it is the first day, I will just have an overall introduction about the lessons in your book, right? After that, from the coming week onwards, I will share a tute, so you can, I will share it in the LMS as well as, yes, the tutes are uploaded in the LMS, so you can get a printout of it before you join the session. So we can discuss the theoretical component. Most probably I am teaching it in the form of questions and answers, right? So at the same time you will be able to learn both the theory and questions at the same time. Okay, right. Hello. Oh, class එකක ඉන්නේ. අද 8ට ඉවර වෙන්නේ. හා මං අහගන්නම් 8න් පස්සේ. හරි. Okay, හරි පුතේ. So what is the lesson that you are doing at school at the moment? Yes, can you remember? You have started the lessons in September, right? Okay. So can you remember where you are at school?
Miss, we were learning about catalysts.
Catalysts, okay. So are you doing in the order of the book, or you are just, they have selected lessons from chemistry, biology and physics, and accordingly are they doing?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So how many lessons so far have you finished?
For this term, about 2.
About 2 means 8A. And then?
8B. And we are going to learn 8C next.
Okay. That means you are going in the order.
Not exactly, but these days, yeah.
Right. Okay. Right. So, so today, since according to the audience, we were supposed to prepare the tutorials, I will just make, now I have an idea about the requirement of the students. Therefore, I will just prepare a tute and share in the LMS, so we can quickly revise the things before the end of July, right? And we will finish everything. Is it okay?
Okay, Miss.
Right. Harry. So, shall we revise certain things? First of all, shall we start from human digestive system? Okay. Right. So, you have to tell me what are the components, what are the parts of the human digestive system. Right. If we start from the buccal cavity. Right. Okay, we'll start from the buccal cavity. Then, so this is the buccal cavity. After that, can you remember? Yes, there is a common chamber for both the nasal tract and the digestive tract. What do you call that common chamber? That is the common chamber for both the nasal cavity and the nasal tract and the digestive tract, or the respiratory tract and the digestive tract. What is it? Yes. That is known as the, yes, you can just revise. It's okay if you have forgotten. Yes, that is known as the
Pharynx.
Yes, you can remember, that is known as the pharynx. Right. Then, after that, after the pharynx, once again there is a and I will share a diagram. Here you can see. I'll take this one, simple one. Okay, so here you can see we start from the mouth, or the we call it as also the buccal cavity, right? Then there is a common chamber for both respiratory tract as well as the digestive tract. So the nasal tract is coming from here, the respiratory tract, and here there is a common chamber for both, which is known as the pharynx, right? Then, as you told, this is the esophagus. Actually, it is made out of cartilaginous rings. So, once we chew the food inside the mouth, that food is undergoing physical digestion, and also there are salivary glands. Actually, there are 3 salivary glands in the mouth cavity. So, due to the secretion of saliva, the food gets mixed with saliva as well, and because of the chemical substances. Actually, there are, what are the chemical substances in those? Yes, there are enzymes, right? There are enzymes in saliva, and so the food gets mixed with saliva. So the chemical digestion also initiates inside the mouth by using the teeth, tongue, the palate. By all this, we are doing the mechanical digestion as well. We break the food into smaller pieces, right? After that, the food passes through the esophagus. Actually, we call the lump of food which is mixed with saliva as the bolus, right? The bolus is moving due to the contractions and relaxations of the muscles of this esophagus. This is a muscular structure. Then it reaches the, what is this part, which is like a sac, right? That is known as the stomach, right? So the stomach can get expanded once we swallow the food, depending on the amount of food that we have taken, right? And on the inner wall of the stomach, there are glands which secrete certain enzymes, gastric juice, and there is an acid also which is secreted. Do you know what the acid is?
Amino acids.
Sorry?
Amino acids.
No, Pute. This makes an acidic medium inside the stomach, that is hydrochloric acid, right? I am just telling certain things extra even, so don't worry. So inside the stomach, the food gets further digested. The digestion was started inside the mouth cavity. Then further digestion takes place inside the stomach. Then there are two glands which send secretions. So you know, liver is the second largest organ in our body, right? So it produces bile, right? This bile is temporarily stored inside this organ, which is known as the gallbladder. It is known as the gallbladder, right? So gallbladder bile into the stomach, and also the pancreas. The pancreas is another organ. It secretes pancreatic juice. So both bile and pancreatic juice are added into the initial part of the small intestine, actually not into the stomach, to the initial part of the small intestine, right? To this part of the small intestine. So they also contain lot of enzymes, right? These enzymes, so you told that you have learnt about catalysts. So what are enzymes actually? Enzymes are, why do we use a catalyst in the laboratory?
To make the reaction faster.
Yes, a catalyst increases the rate of a chemical reaction, right? So we can add something in the laboratory for a particular chemical reaction. Catalysts are reaction specific. That means for a particular reaction, for a particular chemical reaction, there is a particular catalyst, right? So once we add this, what happens is that the rate of the chemical reaction increases. But in our digestive system inside our body, we can't do something like that neither. Therefore, these enzymes help us to increase the rate of the chemical reactions. So the digestion is also a series of chemical reactions. So that is speeded up by the use of these enzymes. Then there is the small intestine. You know, it is a very long tubular structure, right? Then it is connected to the large intestine. It is not that lengthy like the small intestine. Then after that, it ends up with rectum and finally the anus, right? The undigested materials are removed. Okay, digestion is completed. Digestion and absorption. The nutrients are absorbed into blood, right? Nutrients are absorbed into blood in the small intestine. So the absorption is completed inside the small intestine, and the undigested materials are removed. They are stored inside the large intestine. Water is absorbed in the large intestine, and the undigested materials are removed from the body. Hari. Okay. That is about, you can ask anything, right? So today I am just going through the topics, okay? If you have any problem to ask, you can ask anything. Okay, that is about the human digestive system, and I just mentioned about the enzymes. Hari. So before we move on to another topic, I will just share a video related to the digestive system.
බලලායි දෙන්න කියලා.
Hello friends and welcome to a new happy learning video. Today we're going to learn about the digestive system and digestion so that our body can make the
Puti, can you see my screen?
Yes, miss.
digestive system and digestion. So that our body can make the most of the food we eat, it must first transform itself into a simple substance called nutrients. These nutrients are then transported by our blood around our body to be used and converted into energy. This food transformation process is called digestion and is done in the digestive system. The digestive system is a very long tube through which the food travels and is made up of the following parts. The mouth, this is where the digestive journey begins. The teeth both chop and grind up the food we eat. Once it has been made into a ball, it is pushed down the food pipe to the pharynx. The pharynx is a cavity which shares the digestive system with the
Hope this is clearly audible for you, Aishma.
Yes, miss.
Okay, thanks.
respiratory system. It is from the pharynx that the food goes to the esophagus. The esophagus is a soft muscular tube that moves food further down to the stomach. The stomach is a widening of the digestive tube. It creates a movement which allows food with a mixture of gastric fluids. Once this process has been done, it then travels to the small intestine. The small intestine is called small because of its width, not its length. It is actually a lot longer than the large intestine, measuring up to 7 meters in length, almost as wide as a football goal from post to post. Well, it is here in the small intestine where the food digestion journey ends. Now it is up to fluid processes by two glands, the liver and the pancreas, to finalize the transformation from foods to nutrients. Once the food is converted into nutrients, they then traverse the small intestine's walls and filter into our blood, where they are then made good use of by all of our body cells. But what happens to the food that our body doesn't need? All that, such as fiber, for example, is transferred into the large intestine. The large intestine is a thick tube which accumulates substances which our organism cannot digest, and it is where water from these substances is absorbed. The substances then form fecal matter, or what we call poop, and it comes out of the anus. It sounds a little bit disgusting, but that's how our body works. Anyway, friends, I hope you found the digestive system and digestion as interesting as I did. See you later, and don't forget to subscribe to Happy Learning.
Okay, then we will discuss something related to I don't know whether you have discussed about pollination at school. Anyway, I will teach you an overall idea about pollination, the agents of pollination, right? Then what is after the pollination? The fertilization takes place. What is meant by fertilization, right? These things we'll discuss. So have you got an idea what is meant by pollination? Yes. Do you know about pollen? Where do you find pollen? Yes. Once we take a flower, yes, do you know that there are male and female parts in a flower? Right. So, the female parts in a flower are what we call as the gynosium, right? Here there is the stigma, right? This is known as the stigma, and this part is known as the style, right? This is the ovary. So these three parts. Inside the ovary we find, yes, the female gametes. Female gametes are found inside the ovary. We call them as ovules. Female gametes in a plant are known as ovules, right? So all these are collectively known as the gynosium. Gynosium of a flower, right? If you want, you can note. I will give you time to take down the things, right? Hari. Then you know, in a flower there are petals, right? Then there may be the sepals also. Sepal. Then what are the male parts of a flower? Yes, what are the male parts? Yes, these are the male parts. Another. We'll take another color. So this is known as the anther. Anther. And this part is known as the filament. Filament. I think in your previous grades also you have learnt about this, right? Anther and the filament. So inside the anther we find the male gametes, which we call as pollen, right? So as I wrote there, here I will write the male gametes are there. Male gametes, we call these as pollen, right? So this anther and the filament, since these are the male parts, we call it as the androcium. Androcium, right? So basically these are the parts available in a flower, right? So I have mentioned the female parts. Female gametes are known as ovules, and the male gametes are known as pollen, right? Hari. So these are the parts of a flower. Parts of a flower. Oh, the floral parts. You can take it down in your book. So next time I told you, once I share a tute, you can just go write the things on the tute itself. For today, you can just take down the things here. You can put the date and start your work. Pachada. Once you are drawing a diagram, use a pencil, right? Then labeling part you can use with do with a pen, but drawings should be made with a pencil, right? Yes, have you finished? Not yet, no? Done, no? Right. Then what do you mean by this pollination? Right? What do you mean by pollination? Now, the pollen, the male gametes should be deposited on the stigma of a flower because the female gametes are inside the ovary, right? Hari, shall I clear the board? So, what do you mean by this pollination? Now, this pollination is of two types, right? Pollination is of two types. Anyway, that is the deposition of mature pollen on the stigma of a flower of the same species. That means, now you know, if we take a mango plant, the mango flowers should be pollinated by another mango flower, right? That means pollen of a mango flower should be deposited on the stigma of another mango flower for a successful pollination, right? Now, pollen can be deposited from any flower, but for it to be successful, they should belong to the same species, right? Jack from Jack, right? If we take oranges, they should be pollinated by orange, right? So that's what we call as the same species. So pollination is simply, now if we take a flower, if I symbolize like this, right. So the pollen inside the anther can be deposited on the stigma of this flower. Then we call it as self-pollination. The pollen of a flower getting deposited on the stigma of the same flower. That is known as self-pollination, right? So inside the ovary there are ovules. So this pollen will fuse together with the ovules, right? This is what we call as fertilization. This is known as fertilization. Don't worry, I will discuss this in detail when we come to the lesson. Today I told you that I am giving the overall idea of the lessons, right? This is what we call as fertilization. So pollination is of two types, self-pollination, and the other one is known as cross-pollination. Cross-pollination means, now imagine here in one plant, here there is the flower, right, stigma, style and the ovary and the androecium. So there is another plant of the same species, or maybe this may be another flower in the same tree as well, another flower in the same tree. There also this is possible, cross-pollination, right? On Hari. Now what happens? The pollen of one flower getting deposited on pollen on the stigma of another flower of the same species. These belong to the same species. These may be in the same tree or in two different trees, but they should belong to the same species, right? Harida. Then we call this as cross-pollination. This process is known as cross-pollination. The pollen getting deposited, right? So whatever the pollination method, ultimately what happens is the pollen nuclei and the ovule nuclei fuse together, and we call it as fertilization. Then that is how the flower develops into a fruit. Neither we get fruits when there are flowers. Okay, Harry. Before drawing this one, once again I will share a small video related to pollination. After that we can write, and also we can just talk about the agents of pollination.
This video on pollination is part of a series on plant reproduction. You'll need to have a basic understanding of the parts of a flower, so feel free to go back over and watch the video on that if you need to. Links are in the description. Sexual reproduction in flowering plants requires male gametes produced in pollen grains in the anthers to fuse with female gametes found in the ovules. A pollen grain must reach the stigma before its nucleus can travel down towards the female gamete in the ovule. Pollination, the part we're covering in this video, is this step here, the movement of pollen from the anther to the stigma. In case it's not obvious, the definition for pollination is simply the transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma. It can occur from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower, or to a stigma of a different flower on the same plant, or to the stigma of a flower on a different plant. Pollination involving the same plant is referred to as self-pollination, regardless of which flowers are involved. Pollination involving two flowers of separate plants is called cross-pollination. Note that these are different plants, but of the same species. We're going to look at two strategies that different plants have to make pollination happen. We'll look at insect-pollinated flowers and wind-pollinated flowers. We'll start with insect pollination. Flowers that rely on insects have several strategies to attract them. They tend to have brightly coloured petals which are appealing to insects, as well as a strong scent that they like. Many flowers also have nectaries, which produce nectar, a sugary substance that insects feed on. Notice that the nectary is located far below the anthers where the pollen is produced. As an insect visits a flower to get its fill of nectar, it can't avoid getting pollen from the anthers trapped on its body. The pollen grains produced by insect-pollinated flowers tend to be sticky or spiky, so it's really easy for them to cling to an insect's body. Obviously, these insects aren't stopping at just one flower. As they carry on visiting other flowers, some of those pollen grains trapped on their body are bound to get deposited on the next flower. Some of these pollen grains will land on the stigma. The stigma of this type of flower is a sticky structure, ideally suited for pollen to attach to. Some insects are actually pollen eaters, and they visit flowers to eat the pollen itself. This might seem very unhelpful to flowers, but it's just a simple trade-off. While insects are feeding on the pollen, they'll no doubt get some trapped on their body. Flowers can afford to sacrifice some pollen to insect consumption, provided at least some of it is trapped and transferred on the body of that insect. So, insects gain a food source from flowers, whether it's nectar or pollen, or both, while flowering plants gain an opportunity to reproduce thanks to the insects. This sort of relationship, where two organisms interact in a way that they both benefit, is called mutualism. It's not only insects that act as pollinators. Some birds feed on nectar, and so, as they go from flower to flower, they transfer pollen as they go. There are also many species of bat that feed on pollen or nectar, and there are even examples of lizards and geckos that are pollinators. Now we've looked at insect-pollinated, let's look at wind-pollinated flowers. If you haven't studied this before, you probably didn't know that these were even really flowers. You certainly wouldn't give them to someone on Valentine's Day. They don't look pretty or smell nice because there's no benefit to having large colourful petals or producing a scent. They don't need to attract an animal. On these flowers you can see the stigmas here as well as the anthers. The structures may be a little more clear on this simplified diagram of a wind-pollinated flower. Let's compare it to an insect-pollinated flower. Where insect-pollinated flowers tend to have anthers enclosed within the petals, encouraging insects and other animals to brush against them, wind-pollinated flowers have exposed anthers. This allows wind to catch the pollen released from them. Compared to the larger, sticky or spiky pollen grains of the insect-pollinated flowers, wind-pollinated flowers produce smaller, lightweight pollen grains, allowing them to be carried easily in the wind. And the pollen grains are usually produced in larger numbers to account for the fact that only a small fraction of the pollen that leaves the anther will find its way to a stigma of the same species of flower. Where the stigmas of insect-pollinated flowers tend to be sticky to allow pollen on insects to attach, the stigmas of wind-pollinated flowers are usually feather-like in structure. This makes it easier to trap pollen passing by in the wind. The next step for reproduction in flowering plants is for the male gamete to travel to the ovule where fertilization can take place. That's all covered in the next video, which is linked in the description.
Okay, so there you heard about the 3 methods of pollination, right? 3 agents of pollination. Can you remember the 3 agents? How this pollination takes place, who are the agents of pollination, what are the agents? Yes? Yes, the methods by which the deposition of pollen on the stigma of a flower takes place, what are the methods? Yes? One was animals, especially the insects. Then the other 2 methods, can you remember? Yes, the other one is by wind and also by water, right? These are the 3 agents of pollination. Animals, especially insects, the bees, once they go in search of nectar, actually the pollen gets deposited on their appendages, the limbs, right? Then they go to another flower. Then without knowing, actually this pollen will get deposited on the stigma of another flower. Actually the most of the plants prefer this cross pollination, right, rather than deposition of pollen of the same flower on the stigma of that particular flower, right? So animals or insects, then by wind and water. These are the 3 methods, 3 agents of pollination. You can take this down related to pollination. Is this method okay for today? Yes, have you finished? Right. So, we can mention the agents of pollination, right? Agents of pollination. What are the three agents? Yes, animals, especially the insects. Then there are actually the wind supports pollination and also water helps for pollination. These are the three main agents of pollination, right? So just after the pollination takes place, now pollen and the ovules are fused together, right? Then I told you fertilization takes place. Just after the pollination, the next stage is fertilization, right? Fertilization. Fertilization, right? Hari. So after fertilization, what happens to the flower? Yes, the flower develops into what? The flower develops into, yes, what happens? From what do we get fruits? Fruits means including the vegetables. The fruit is the ultimate product after fertilization. What does the flower become? It becomes a fruit actually, right? Fruit. So there we mentioned about certain parts of the flower, no? So the actually the ovary becomes the fruit actually. Ovary becomes the fruit. Ovary of the flower becomes the fruit, right? Then inside the ovary there were ovules. So these ovules become seeds inside the fruit, right? Now if we take watermelon, papaya, in those there are so many seeds, right? That means inside the ovary of the flower there had been so many ovules, right? But once we take mango, avocado, on these there is only one seed inside. That means inside the ovary there had been only one ovule, right? Okay, ovules. Ovary becomes the fruit and ovules become the seeds. Okay, you can take down. So I'm just simply mentioning the facts, right? So we mentioned about pollination, then the agents of pollination, what is meant by fertilization. So that is why we say that the bees are very important, right? If there aren't any bees, it would be the end of human population also, because these bees are helpful for pollination, right? If pollination takes place, then only we will find enough food for our survival, because in the world there is a high demand for food, right? So that demand can be fulfilled only if this pollination happens. This can be done even artificially, but it is not that easy. So that is naturally done by these three agents, especially the insects. Okay, Hari. Now I will show you something related to fertilization in plants, since you have finished writing.
Fertilization is the fusion of a male gamete with a female gamete to form a zygote. In flowering plants, the male gametes are found in pollen grains, produced in the anthers, while the female gametes are found in the ovules. Pollen must first travel from an anther to the stigma in a process called pollination. There's more detail on pollination in a separate video. Look for a link in the description. When a pollen grain lands on the stigma, it forms a pollen tube down the style of the flower. The pollen grain's nucleus travels down the pollen tube as it grows towards the ovary and the ovule. The pollen tube reaches a tiny opening in the ovule, and then the tip of the pollen tube dissolves, allowing the pollen nucleus to enter the ovule. Here, the pollen nucleus fuses with the egg cell nucleus. This fusion of the two nuclei is fertilization. Fertilization creates a new cell called a zygote. The single zygote cell divides and develops to become a plant embryo, which has a plumule and a radicle. The plumule will go on to become the first shoot of the plant, while the radicle will become the first root. The remaining contents of the ovule develop into cotyledons, which act as a food store for the new plant. Seeds need their own food store for the earliest stage of growth because no food is produced by photosynthesis until leaves develop. Surrounding the seed is a seed coat, a protective layer which forms from the ovary wall. While the ovule develops into the seed, the ovary develops into the fruit. Side by side, it's easy to compare the structures at each state, with the flower's ovary becoming the fruit with seeds inside which form from ovules. The next video covers the initial growth of a seed, known as germination, and all.
Right, it is something like a story, right? First there were flowers, right, and after that the pollination took place, then the flower developed into a fruit. Then what happens? Now there is a mango tree with full of fruits. Then what should happen? Now some of them will be plucked by people, right? If I just indicate like these mangoes, no? Okay. Hari. Then what should happen to those fruits? Yes, if all these fall down near the, we call this as the mother plant, right? If all these fall down near the mother plant, what will happen? Yes.
New trees will plant.
Yes, new plants will be developed around the mother plant. New plants will be developed because these fruits, once they are fallen on the ground, since they have seeds, what happens? These seeds will germinate. That is germination. Germination. Right? Germination. So, is this successful if all these fruits are fallen near the mother plant and all of the seeds get germinated? Now, there are hundreds of small mango trees around the mother plant. Is it something suitable to happen? No. Why? Why isn't it suitable?
Because trees need space.
Yes, they need space. They need space, they need water, they need sunlight, right? And they need to obtain nutrients from the soil, right? So what happens now? There are so many individuals in a limited space. Now they compete with each other. They compete with each other in order to get the resources, right? In this competition, most of the individuals will die, right? So for the mango plant, it is not something good, right? Because biologically in nature, the individuals are adapted to spread their individuals as much as possible. That is why something called reproduction is there, right? Now as a result of reproduction, actually they have produced fruits, and the seeds have been germinated in order to produce new plants. But once they are close to the mother plant, they compete with each other for the resources like sunlight, space, water, nutrients, right? Therefore, there should be a method for dispersion. What is dispersion? Yes, these fruits should be taken away from the mother plant. These fruits should be taken away from the mother plant, right? That is what we call as dispersion, right? Now we have seen certain birds will eat those mangoes, and they will take it to some other place. They eat the flesh and throw away the seed. So that is a method of dispersion. So they did that since there is a fleshy part in mango. Otherwise they don't pluck the fruits, no, right? They pluck the fruits, take it to somewhere else, eat the flesh and throw away the seed. So that is a method of dispersion. So likewise, we can identify 4 methods of dispersion, right? 4 methods. Animals. One method is animals. Then in the case of coconut trees, like the coconuts will fall into water, and through water those fruits will be taken away. Then they will find a suitable place and they get germinated, right? Water is another method of fruit and seed dispersal. Fruit and seed dispersal, right? In some of the plants, have you seen cotton? They get spread along with wind. Something like vara, right?
Yes.
So they have hair or feather like projections, right? So they are taken away by wind. So they will get deposited on a suitable substrate and they get germinated. Therefore, wind is another method of fruit and seed dispersal, right? Then there are certain cases, something like rubber, and sometimes even winged beans. When the pod is dried off, they just explode and the seeds are spread everywhere, right? So this method is known as explosive mechanisms. In rubber plants also, the fruit, once it is dried off, it explodes, spreading the seeds everywhere, right? Explosive mechanisms, explosion or explosive mechanisms, right? That is another method of fruit and seed dispersal. So as you told, so this dispersion of fruit and seed dispersal is something important. Then the seeds will find new habitats, right? They will find new habitats, they will get germinated. So then the biodiversity also increases, neither. Otherwise, when there is a large mango tree in that area, we will find only mango plants, ne? So it does not happen because of this fruit and seed dispersal. Therefore, they will be spread to far away places. So that is important for biodiversity as well as for the survival of that particular species. They won't be destroyed. They will find new locations, new habitats, and they will successfully survive, right? So dispersion is something important. You can just mention methods of fruit and seed dispersal කියලා අපි දාමු. Methods of fruit and seed dispersal. After that I will mention about germination. Methods of fruit and seed dispersal. There are 4 methods: animals, water, wind, and explosive mechanisms. Okay, right. Then once the seeds are deposited on a suitable substrate, what should happen? They should get germinated. Now, have you germinated seeds? Have you germinated green gram seeds when you were in primary grades?
Yes, miss.
Right. So what did you do there? When you are going to germinate green gram, what did you do? Yes.
We put some seeds in wet cotton.
Yes, you put some seeds on wet cotton. First, it's better if you can soak the seeds in water for few hours. Right, you can soak the seeds in water for few hours, and after that you can transfer the seeds onto wet cotton. Okay, then daily you have to add water. Okay, right. So why do we use water here? Right, so water is one of the factors needed for germination. The seed will absorb water. The seed will absorb water. You know what is meant by absorption? Uragano, absorb. The seed absorb water, right? Then it will become swollen. Actually, by absorbing water, the enzymes inside the seed becomes active in order to convert the stored food into simpler forms, right? That is the biological requirement. Then there should be an optimum temperature. Optimum means suitable temperature should be there. Optimum temperature. Sometimes in some of the cases we have to store the seeds. For example, for paddy, the farmers use stock the seeds in wet gunny bags and keep them for some time. That is to give that optimum temperature, the suitable temperature for germination, right? Then in addition to that, oxygen is also needed, because these germinating seeds need to respirate. Oxygen is also needed. And in addition to that, can we germinate boiled seeds? Can we? Yes, can we germinate boiled seeds? No, we can't germinate boiled seeds. So what is the other factor? The viability or the liveliness of the seeds is also essential in addition to these 3 factors, right? Viability or the liveliness should be there. And so these are the factors needed for germination. Factors needed for germination. Okay. Harry, can you take this down? Germination.
Yes, what about sunshine?
Sunlight is also needed. Sunlight is needed actually once they have germinated. They develop the seed leaves, no? Yes, that's a good question. Now imagine that this seed has been germinated, and you know there are the seed leaves, the cotyledons have come out, and the leaves develop. Then both of these seed leaves as well as these leaves need sunlight. For what? They will photosynthesize and produce food further. In that case they need sunlight after the seed is being germinated. Seed has been germinated. Right? Okay, good. So in actually dicots, these seed leaves come out of soil. Seed leaves, dicots like green gram, chickpeas, cowpea. In those the seed leaves come out and they have developed leaves as well. These are the leaves and you can see the roots. Yes, finished. No, not yet. No.
Finished, miss.
Okay. Then now after being germinated, now it should develop as a new plant, right? Then we can discuss about photosynthesis actually. So what are the factors needed for photosynthesis? Plants acting as primary producers, right? We'll watch these. Okay, first of all, we'll watch about seed germination, then I will explain about photosynthesis.
Germination is the start of growth of a plant from a seed. It's that first stage where the seed sprouts to become a seedling. And let's start by having a close look at the structure of a seed. Inside a seed is a plumule, which will go on to become the first plant shoot, and a radicle, which will form the first root. Seeds also have cotyledons, which act as a food store for the new plant until it's able to carry out photosynthesis. And they also have a seed coat, which forms a protective layer. If we look at the cross section of this seed, you can see the plumule, radicle, 2 cotyledons, and a seed coat around the outside. As germination progresses, you can see a root system become established and the first shoot and leaves developing from what was the plumule. A few days later, the shoot has emerged from the cotyledons. You can see here the cotyledons have become leaf-like structures. These are known as seed leaves. They are green and able to carry out photosynthesis until the first true leaves, developed from the plumule, are established. Looking at all three stages side by side, you can see the changes over time. So what do seeds need to germinate? Let's start with some assumptions that people often make. Not all of these are correct, by the way. First, we usually make seeds grow by putting them in soil. So maybe seeds need soil to germinate. If you plant a seed, you water it. So water seems sensible. All plants need sunlight, so perhaps germinating seeds do too. Photosynthesis requires carbon dioxide, so that's a reasonable guess. Plants must respire, so perhaps the seeds need oxygen for respiration. Let's look closer at each of those ideas. First up, soil. Here are some seeds that I placed on wet tissue for a few days, and they're germinating just fine. No soil in sight. No, soil is not needed for germination. Water? Yes, essential for germination. Dormant seeds are dry, but the chemical reactions for growth and development can only take place in solution when molecules are free to move. What about sunlight? Well, remember, seeds can't carry out photosynthesis. Instead, they get their food from cotyledons. What's more, seeds often germinate while buried in soil where there's complete darkness. So, no, sunlight is generally not needed. There are exceptions to that, but I won't go into them today. Next, carbon dioxide. Well, we know this is required for photosynthesis. But think again about our soon-to-germinate seed. There are no leaves, and there's often no light. So, no photosynthesis. So, no, carbon dioxide is not required for germination. What about oxygen for respiration? Yes, this one is essential. Growth and development require energy, and this is released via respiration. Remember that this type of respiration requires glucose and oxygen. Glucose is already supplied in the seed from the cotyledons, but oxygen must be supplied from the air if germination is to succeed. There's one more thing, a warm temperature. Remember that pretty much all chemical reactions in living organisms require enzymes. For reactions involving enzymes, it can't be so hot that the enzymes are destroyed, or so cold that the molecules move too slowly. For successful germination, we need a warm temperature that's just right. The main summary of this video is that germination is the start of growth of a plant from a seed. For germination to happen, seeds require water, oxygen, and a warm temperature.
Okay, so as you saw in the video also, after being germinated, actually the seed needs to photosynthesize, because you know the plants are known as autotrophs, right? They act as the primary producers in an ecosystem, right? They provide food for the whole living world because of the process which we call as photosynthesis, right? Photosynthesis. Okay, so what are the factors needed for photosynthesis? Yes, what are the factors needed for photosynthesis?
Water.
Okay, from the roots the plant has to absorb water. Yes, water is absorbed by the roots. Water, right? Then carbon dioxide. Yes, carbon dioxide is taken by stomata, right? The openings inside the leaves. carbon dioxide is taken in. Then what else? Yes. What else? What is given by the sun mainly? Yes.
Sun.
Yes, it provides light energy. Better to say light energy. Light energy. Then this light energy is absorbed because of a green color pigment inside the leaves. What, do you know what is the name given for
No.
this? Yes?
Chlorophyll.
Yes, the name of the pigment is chlorophyll. Chlorophyll, which is the green pigment, it absorbs the energy of light, right? Due to having these four factors actually. So, carbon dioxide and water. Carbon dioxide and water act as the raw materials, right? Then, because of the presence of sunlight or light energy and chlorophyll, they produce what? What is the main product of photosynthesis?
Oxygen.
That is the byproduct. Oxygen is an important byproduct of photosynthesis. Actually, that is very important. It is the byproduct. The main requirement of photosynthesis is to produce food. So, what is the main product of photosynthesis? Yes?
Flowers.
No, Pute. What is the main product? What is produced as a result of this photosynthetic process? That is glucose, right? Glucose is the main food item produced in plants due to photosynthesis, right? And in addition to that, it produces oxygen as well, which is a gaseous byproduct. So it is important to, now they can take carbon dioxide in and give out oxygen. So this is very important to maintain carbon dioxide oxygen balance in the environment as well, in the atmosphere, right? So photosynthesis is important because of two main things. It produces food for the whole living world and it maintains the carbon dioxide oxygen balance in the environment, right? In the atmosphere. Okay, you can just summarize about photosynthesis as well. is finished?
Yes, Miss.
Had. Okay. Then we'll have a look at the photosynthetic process in a video.
That takes place inside a plant. It's when plants use light to make food. An easy way to remember this is photo means light and synthesis means to put something together. This chemical reaction is vital for a plant to survive and to grow. Plants need food to respire, to grow, and to reproduce. Plants are producers. This means that they are able to make their own food. They do this by the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis takes place in the leaves of plants, specifically in the chloroplasts of leaves containing chlorophyll. The equation for photosynthesis is carbon dioxide from the air, water, and light energy, usually from sunlight. This reaction produces oxygen and glucose. The formula for carbon dioxide is CO2. The formula for water is H2O. The formula for oxygen is O2. The formula for glucose is C6H12O6. Firstly, carbon dioxide and water enter the leaf. Carbon dioxide enters through the stomata of the leaf via diffusion. Water is absorbed by the roots from the soil. This water is then transported to the leaves by the xylem vessels. Sunlight provides the energy for the process to take place. The chlorophyll in plants can absorb the light energy. The products are oxygen and glucose. Oxygen is released back into the air and it's released through the stomata of the leaf. Glucose is a source of energy for the plant. Glucose is transported around the plant by the phloem vessels. Leaves are adapted for photosynthesis in a few different ways. Firstly, leaves are big and they have a large surface area. This allows more sunlight to be absorbed. Secondly, leaves are green due to the chlorophyll in the chloroplasts. This helps them to absorb sunlight. Thirdly, leaves are thin, which allows the diffusion of gases in and out of the leaf. Fourthly, the leaves have vascular tissues. Tubes that carry food from the leaves to the rest of the plant are known as phloem. Tubes that carry water and nutrients from the roots to the other parts of the plant are called the xylem. Now that we have learnt what photosynthesis is, we must understand that if any of these elements are limited, then it will affect the rate of photosynthesis. So, if there's not enough carbon dioxide, water, or light energy, then the rate of photosynthesis will be affected. Therefore, the rate of photosynthesis will be lower. Other factors that affect photosynthesis are the temperature and the amount of chlorophyll in leaves. So if the temperature is too high, then enzymes will denature. And if there is less chlorophyll in the leaves, then this means that less light energy can be absorbed. Ultimately, both will result in a lower rate of photosynthesis.
What if you could focus better? You can. With
Okay, after this photosynthesis has taken place, I told you glucose is the main product of photosynthesis, and it is actually temporarily stored inside the leaves in the form of starch, right? And later on, this starch is converted into a solution of sucrose, and it is translocated through the phloem tissue to the other parts of the plant, that is for storage. Now in some of the plants there are fruits, so the food that has been synthesized as a result of photosynthesis has been stored inside the fruits in some plants. In some plants we eat the root, like carrot, beetroot, right? So in them the food is stored inside the roots. In plants like sugarcane, we consume the stem. So food is stored inside the stem in those plants. Likewise, there are different locations in which food is stored in plants, right? So that food is translocated in the form of a sucrose solution through the phloem tissue. Phloem is the tissue through which food is translocated. And you told me water is absorbed by the roots, right? This water is transported through the xylem tissue. Water gets transported through the xylem tissue, right? Likewise, there are two main types of tissues in a plant which are responsible for the transportation of substances, right? Hari. There I summarized about photosynthesis, right? So in photosynthesis we saw that carbon dioxide is taken in and oxygen is given out. So plants perform a very important function there, right? Hari. So have you heard about the term? Finally we'll mention about global warming. So I just came from photosynthesis to global warming, right? So global warming, now there is an optimum temperature in the Earth's atmosphere, right? We find life on Earth because of this, right? There is a suitable temperature on Earth, right? On other planets we don't find life in because some of them are too warm, the temperature is very high, and in some of the planets the temperature is very low. So both of these conditions are not suitable for the existence of life. Therefore, we find life on Earth. One reason for that is having an optimum temperature. Then because of that, water exists as a liquid, and we have an atmosphere with oxygen and carbon dioxide, right? So plants play an important role in order to take carbon dioxide in and release oxygen. But once people cut down the trees, what happens? Yes, the amount of carbon dioxide taken in is reduced, right? The only natural method of taking carbon dioxide away from the atmosphere is photosynthesis. When trees are cut down, the amount of carbon dioxide taken away from the atmosphere is reduced. Now there is more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. More carbon dioxide is there, right? And also there are so many other methods by which carbon dioxide is added to the atmosphere, like the combustion of fuel, right? In factories, in vehicles. Likewise, there are so many places where combustion takes place, and sometimes due to decomposition of dead plant and animal bodies, carbon dioxide get collected, and not only carbon dioxide, there are some other gases which act as greenhouse gases. Now you have heard about, you may have seen even greenhouses, right? So we make greenhouses for certain crop cultivations. That is to give the required temperature, to maintain a required temperature. Now in our area, for strawberry cultivation, sometimes they may maintain greenhouses. That is to maintain an optimum temperature which is suitable for the crop. In the globe, now if this is the earth, and if I indicate the earth's atmosphere like this, when there are more gases like carbon dioxide, what happens? Carbon dioxide, methane, then sulfur dioxide, maybe even water vapor act as a greenhouse gas. What happens? Those gases absorb the solar radiation. Now sun gives out two forms of energy, light and heat. The heat rays, once they reach the earth's atmosphere, most of them will be reflected. Some of them will retain in the earth's atmosphere. Now what happens? When there are more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, they will absorb the solar heat more. Then those heat rays retain in the earth's atmosphere. So greenhouse effect is something needed to have a suitable temperature. But when more greenhouse gases are collected, what happens? The temperature of the earth's atmosphere increases excessively. Nowadays we are experiencing this condition. Earth's atmosphere has become very warm. That is what we call as global warming. Right? Later on we will discuss in detail. So because of this, what happens? Now temperature has been increased. Then the in the polar regions, the polar ice caps become dissolved, right? Now you have heard about Antarctica, which is considered to be the coldest area on earth. Now they have found out the growth of plants in it because the temperature has been increased. That means these glaciers and the ice deposits, they dissolve, right? That's a problem. Then the world climatic changes happen because of this. Adverse weather conditions occur because of this. So when the glaciers, polar ice caps dissolve, what happens to the seawater level? Seawater level rises, right? When the seawater level rises, the islands, nowadays actually the Maldivian islands, they are drowning. Some of them have already drowned, right? So such problems arise, right? Global climatic changes, adverse weather conditions occur. Now in USA these days we are hearing about forest fires, right? So that is also because of an adverse environmental effect. Okay, so today I just wanted to give you a surface knowledge to take certain topics and discuss with you. Right? Did you get something important today? Was it useful?
Yes, please.
Okay. Right. So next time onwards we will have this in an orderly manner. Right now, since I know the book and all this, I will just prepare a handout and share it with you. Okay. Right then. See you on next week. Stay safe and have a nice week.
Stay safe, miss.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.